Welcome to the Medcurity podcast. Today, we are going to dive into a topic that doesn't always get the spotlight it deserves, but is absolutely crucial in the world of healthcare cybersecurity, and this is insider threats. You might be wondering what exactly we mean by insider threats. Well, simply put, these are risks that come from the people within your organization, employees, contractors, or even trusted partners whose actions, whether intentional or not, can put sensitive data at risk. Now, why is this topic so important for healthcare? Think about it. Healthcare organizations handle some of the most sensitive data out there, from patient names and social security numbers to detailed medical records. The information is incredibly valuable. And because healthcare environments are so complex, with so many people accessing systems and databases, it only takes one mistake or one rogue action to create a huge problem. That's why we need to talk about how we can keep patient information safe even when the threat comes from within. Now let's start by looking at those two main sides of insider threats. On the one hand, we have unintentional threats, those honest mistakes that happen because we're all human. Picture this: an employee might accidentally email a spreadsheet filled with patient records to the wrong person, or maybe someone forgets to properly lock a device when they're stepping away from their desk. Even something as seemingly minor as misconfiguring a system can lead to unintended data exposure. And while these errors aren't malicious, they still count as HIPAA violations. Under HIPAA's rules, any unauthorized disclosure of protected health information can trigger serious consequences, from regulatory fines to damage to an organization's reputation. On the other hand, there are malicious insider threats. These are the cases where someone intentionally misuses their access to steal or leak data, often for personal gain or to harm the organization. Imagine an employee who deliberately accesses patient records they have no business looking at, maybe even selling that data on the dark web. Or consider a disgruntled worker who, out of revenge, might leak sensitive information to cause chaos. These incidents can be particularly dangerous because the person already has legitimate access to the systems and knows where the valuable information is stored. And while malicious acts may be less common than accidental ones, they're often more damaging when they do occur. So, how does HIPAA come into play here? HIPAA's privacy and security rules are all about protecting patient information by ensuring that only the right people have access to it. One of the key principles in HIPAA is called the minimum necessary rule. We've talked about this on the podcast before. This means that even if you do have legitimate access, you should only view or share the smallest amount of information needed to get the job done. When insiders overstep that boundary, whether by accident or on purpose, it not only breaches patient trust, but it also puts the organization at risk of serious penalties. Now you might be thinking, okay, but what can we actually do about insider threats? Now that's where modern cybersecurity strategies come in, and I'm excited to share a couple ideas with you. One of the approaches that has really been gaining traction is the zero trust model. You might have heard the phrase never trust, always verify thrown around, and that's essentially the idea behind zero trust. Instead of assuming that everyone inside the network is safe, zero trust treats every access request as if it's coming from an unknown source. This means every time someone tries to access sensitive data, their identity is verified and their access is strictly controlled. It's all about limiting the lateral movement within your network. Even if an insider is able to breach one part of the system, zero trust policies help ensure that they can't just roam freely and access anything. Another powerful tool in the fight against insider threats is user behavior analytics, or UBA. Think of UBA as a way to get to know the normal behavior of each user in your network. Once you have that baseline, it becomes much easier to spot anomalies. Like if someone suddenly starts downloading a massive amount of data or accessing files that they've never touched before. By continuously monitoring these patterns, UBA can alert you to potential threats before they spiral into a full-blown breach. And what's great is that even if an insider's actions initially appear normal, subtle deviations can be flagged early on, giving you a chance to intervene before any real harm is done. Now let's break this down with a couple of examples. Imagine a scenario where a hospital staff member, let's call her Sarah, is known to access patient records as part of her daily routine. One day, the system flags an alert because Sarah is downloading hundreds of files at once, far more than she typically accesses. In a well-designed UBA system, this deviation from her normal behavior would trigger an alert, prompting an investigation. It could be that Sarah accidentally triggered a batch download, or maybe her account was compromised. Either way, early detection allows the organization to step in and figure out what's really happening. Now let's consider a different scenario. Suppose an employee is leaving the organization, but for some reason, their access credentials aren't promptly revoked. This might sound like a small oversight, but it's a perfect recipe for a security breach. A departing employee could potentially take sensitive data with them, or worse, someone else might pick up those credentials and use them for malicious purposes. Organizations need to have solid offboarding processes in place so that when someone leaves, their access is immediately terminated. This is not just best practice, this is a requirement under HIPAA to ensure that only current, authorized users have access to patient information. Of course, technology is just one piece of the puzzle here, right? It's also about creating that culture of compliance where everyone understands the importance of data security. Regular training is essential. Every employee, from the receptionist to the IT staff, should know the ins and outs of HIPAA and why protecting patient data matters. Training should not just cover how to handle data properly, but also how to recognize and report potential security issues. You might be surprised how many insider incidents could be prevented by simply raising awareness. When staff understand that even a small mistake, like sending an email to the wrong person, can have huge repercussions, they're more likely to follow the protocols diligently. Another practical step is implementing strict access controls. This means ensuring that every employee only has access to the information they need to perform their job. It sounds simple, but in practice, it can be challenging to manage, especially in large healthcare organizations with complex hierarchies. Regularly reviewing who has access to what and updating permissions as roles change is a must. It's all about the principle of least privilege, the idea that no one should have more access than they absolutely need. This not only limits the damage if an account is compromised, but also makes it easier to spot when someone is accessing information that they shouldn't be. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about how these insider threat strategies come together in real life. Let's imagine a case that illustrates the importance of proactive monitoring. In one instance, a mid-sized hospital noticed unusual activity when one employee's login showed a pattern that didn't match the rest of the staff. The system's behavior analytics flagged this as abnormal, and upon investigation, it turned out that the employee had been accessing files well beyond the scope of their job responsibilities. While the breach wasn't massive in scale, it did serve as a wake-up call for the organization. They realized that their offboarding process needed to be tighter and that their regular access reviews were overdue. As a result, they not only avoided a potential HIPAA violation, but they also strengthened their overall security posture. This case reminds us that even small lapses can be the canary in the coal mine when it comes to insider threats. So what is the biggest takeaway from today? In healthcare, insider threats, whether intentional or accidental, are a serious challenge, but they're not insurmountable. The key lies in a multi-layered approach that combines modern cybersecurity strategies like Zero Trust and UBA with solid everyday practices. It's about making sure that every user only sees what they need to see, that every action is monitored, and that everyone is aware of the critical nature of the data they handle. With robust training, strict access controls, continuous monitoring, and a proactive culture, healthcare organizations can significantly reduce the risk of insider breaches and ensure that they remain compliant with HIPAA. As you think about your own organization, you might ask yourself, do we have the right systems in place to detect abnormal behavior? Are our offboarding practices tight enough? Are we training our staff well enough to understand the risks? These are important questions because the stakes are incredibly high. Patient trust, regulatory compliance, and ultimately the safety of the information that underpins quality care all depend on it. In wrapping up, remember that insider threats aren't just about high-profile data breaches or malicious actors. They're also about the everyday human errors that can lead to big problems. By taking a proactive and layered approach to security, you're not just checking boxes for HIPAA compliance, you're building a resilient system that protects patients, preserves trusts, and upholds the integrity of your organization. It's a tough challenge, but with the right mix of technology, policies, and culture, it's one that definitely can be managed. I hope that you found these insights useful and that you feel a bit more equipped to handle the threats from within. Stay safe, stay secure, and we'll see you next time.